So I'm really happy to have Andy with us, speaking about writing is designing. So round of applause to Andy WELFLE.
Thank you, everybody. This talk is a little bit more technical than the JavaScript talk, so we're going to be talking about writing English language, so brace yourselves. Hey, everybody, I'm Andy. I am a content designer at Glean, which is a little AI tooling startup in San Francisco. And maybe more relevant to this, I co-wrote a book called Writing is Designing, Words in the User Experience, which is also the name of this talk. So that book is that one on the end. These are just some things I like. I like to make zines. I actually wish that I had made more zines to bring with me so that I could give them out. But I have a cat. I love pencils. Somebody in here said they like doing letter writing. Like I love writing letters. So pencils, pens, notebooks, all that stuff I love. Live in San Francisco, work on a team. Yeah, just some few things about myself. My actual first experience with Smashing Conference was in March 2016 in Oxford. One of the things I really love about this conference is like it's not really in just sort of like boring venues, right? Like we're on the stage of a musical right now. That's really cool. In Oxford, it was in like the Oxford City Hall. Just like beautiful, big old Renaissance paintings, like just hanging up, like big wood paneled conference rooms. I do want to mention little baby Vitaly from almost 10 years ago. So I gave this talk, speaking of just big, large venues at Config, similar. I've changed up a little bit, not so much pink. With that screen, the pink was just like reflecting off people's faces, so it was too much. I also updated a few of my slides and some of my examples. And I also embarrassingly realized that I'm wearing the same jacket as I was then, which I did not intend to do, but I guess I'm nothing if not consistent, right? Like I guess this is my speaking jacket, so that's that. So we're going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about what I mean when I say that writing is designing. We're going to go through some of that. How writing and language are just really important at every stage of the design process. It's not something that comes just at the beginning or just at the end or just somewhere in the middle. We're going to talk about some big principles to make sure that your UX writing is effective, and we're going to talk about some pragmatic ways that you can use AI to aid your UX writing. I am an AI skeptic. I also use it every day, so I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I imagine a lot of you are too. And so given the fact that like we're being asked by our leadership to use AI products more in our work, this is just some like practical ways that you could use that for writing your interface language. So anybody in this audience a content designer? Yeah, okay. So some people here. Nice. Anybody here work with content designers? UX writers, things like that. Nice. Okay, cool. So I also want to disclaim that like most of my examples in this presentation are from sort of like the product software world. I worked at Facebook and Adobe and Cruise and Microsoft and places like that. So it's been a long time since I've been in working on web stuff, which I miss and still love. So I think a lot of this is broadly applicable to the web as well. Cool. So there's so many job titles for folks who think about the language in a product design. So tag yourself. I'm a content designer, but I have been a content strategist. I've been a UX writer, kind of all over the place. I think the main thing that's important, though, is like you don't have to be a content designer. You can be a designer. You can be a PM. You can be a front-end developer. You can be a back-end developer. All that matters is that I care about the words that happens in the interface, and hopefully so do you. So that's really about the only thing that's super important for this talk. An exercise I really like to do, we did this in the book, to just show how kind of inextricable language is from a user experience, is doing something that Mig Reyes, who is now the head of product design at Duolingo, back when he worked at 37 Signals, he did the blog post. And he was like, you take an interface. Americans in the audience recognize this is DoorDash, right? And just take out all the words. How usable is it, right? Like that first one, it's actually maybe usable, right? Like you can kind of see that there's groceries. Or I think I have a pointer here, don't I? I don't know where my pointer is. You can see there's groceries or takeout or something. Not quite sure what. Second slide, there's meals. That's great. If anybody's here from San Francisco, you might recognize Señor Sisig. Really good Filipino-Mexican fusion. But like, what's in it, and what are they called, and what's the prices? Like, we have no idea what that is. And that last screen, that's just unusable, right? Like, it maybe has something to do with delivery. There's a map on there. Arguably, I left all the iconography in, but like, arguably, iconography is part of content design. So I'm going to going to give that back, but really hard to use something like this. Setting screens, things that are just sort of like pure language experiences, are almost unreadable, right? Like it's really hard to kind of know what to do there. An interface like this, I bet many of you are UX literate enough to know what this is from. Notion, yeah. But like, what are you supposed to do? What can you do in this, right? Everything on this interface is language. There's a really great quote from Nicole Fenton, who until recently was at 18F, and she wrote a book called Nicely Said, which was a huge inspiration for, excuse me, let me adjust my microphone. She was a huge inspiration for our work. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but she said, you know, I don't write fiction or short stories. I use language to solve problems. I use words as material. And that's kind of the basis of this, right? Like this is, we're designing, but with words instead of pixels or rectangles or colors or type, whatever. What does that look like in action, right? So let's say you have a button. You're working at a place and you're working on a button. And your PM or your designer or one of your coworkers come to you and says, hey, what should that button say? And you're like, oh God, I don't know. Like, you just showed me this like right now. What do you say next? Does anybody know? What's it do? Close. Well, it depends. I have so many questions, right? There's so many things that need to be ironed out here. So what are the entry and exit points for this button? Like where does it come from? Where does it take you? What action immediately follows pressing this button? Are you like, is it going to charge your credit card when you hit this button? Or is it just taking you to like a confirmation screen? Is this even the right component in the first place? Like, should it be a button? Should it be an inline link or a menu item or something like that? What's the inverse action of this button? If it's like a like button, is it unlike? Is it dislike? One of my favorites when I worked at Adobe, if anybody here knows Behance, the sort of like main action that you can use to interact with something is appreciate. So what happens when you unappreciate a post? How does it translate or localize? One thing that's just always kind of a bee in my bonnet is at many of the confirmation buttons that say like got it. Like that makes sense in English, but there's a lot of languages where got it is just like, yeah, got it. It's like a dismissal, which is the reverse of like what you want to do here, right? You want to sort of like confirm. So, and then also does this fit within our voice and tone strategies? So all this to say is this can't really live in isolation, right? Like you have to really see the interface around it in order to like really choose the right language, just to simply put in that label. And oftentimes, I'm sure many of you have used interfaces where, that button was not well thought out, or that form was not well thought out, or something. So they're maybe not thinking about writing as a part of the design process. So a really great way to help show how writing comes into play at design at every stage of the process is by comparing it to design systems. So first time around I gave this talk, and also in the book we compare it to, everybody familiar with like Jesse James Garrett's like elements of UX, right? Like it's like system, scope, strategy, surface, like that, which is great. That makes a lot of sense. But I was like, for this crowd, and I feel like design systems would be a good kind of way to compare this to. So, in a typical like atomic unit of a design system, you have things like foundations, you have like core guiding principles, you have elements that are basic building blocks, and you have like components, right, that are reusable combos of those things. So when you think about visual design, right, like oftentimes you're thinking about, really I should have reversed the order, so the foundation's on the bottom, but here we are. Color, typography, spacing, things like that, like guiding principles. You can think about like icons and fields and fonts and things like that when you're thinking about elements. And components are typically made up of that stuff, right? Dialog boxes, forms, and tables. So just as you have that, you also have like content things you're thinking about. So foundationally, you're thinking about voice and tone and grammar and punctuation, things like that. You have basic elements, which are like terms and actions, so like or dislike or appreciate or whatever. Names, things like that. And then you kind of like are putting those together into content patterns and microcopy and like UX strings, things like that. So we're going to kind of go through and just see some examples of these. One way I like to like really see a company's voice and tone strategy is by comparing it to like similar companies, right? So you probably recognize this. This is Claude and ChatGPT. You can really see in the greeting here that it really kind of matches their brand, right? Like Claude is very like conversational and humanistic. They're just like, hey, back at it, Andy. This is the good works of my friend Chelsea Larson, who wrote a bunch of these little greetings for that. That's pretty good. And ChatGPT just like gets right down to business. And I think since I put this slide together, they do a little bit more personalization, but like what can I help with? Kind of a classic example, at least in the US, is comparing. Oh, yeah, thank you. Is this good? Okay, thank you. I'll try not to move my head anymore. So, example from Lyft and Uber, both rideshare apps. It's always been sort of like set apart from each other. Uber's a little bit more serious. Lyft is trying to be a little bit more fun in their branding. It's really kind of like clear in their greetings here. Lyft, howdy Andy, where are you going? Whereas Uber, like they're just like cutting straight to the chase, like where to, right? You kind of see that in action. This is a really good example of voice just like gone crazy. Like, does anybody remember? I don't know if it was just in the Bay Area, but do you remember Caviar? It was a food delivery app that was bought by Postmates and then bought by Uber because the US is like 5 corporations in a trench coat. I got this the Monday after Easter one year, and I'll read it to you. First, it was the jelly beans. Then Nana gave you a chocolate bunny the size of your foot. Plus, you ate that microwave peep on a dare. Also, that caramel white chocolate thing. So, and then my favorite ever call to action, eat a salad. So I remember getting this and I stared at it I read it like 3 times trying to understand what this was trying to tell me. And then finally I was like, okay, you click that button, it takes you to like healthy options, right? But I'm just like, this is like, imagine English is like your second language and like maybe you're a little shaky in it, like what even does this say? So yeah, just a really fun example that I just like had to use here. Another very like foundational element of content design is a style guide, right? Like this is from this is Shopify's Polaris design system. Many style guides have like content stuff in the design system. There's capitalization, formatting, headings, things like this. Hopefully your company has a style guide somewhere, like even if it's just in a Google Doc, it's like useful. But it basically just like helps humans and now robots kind of like learn how you write for your company. All right, let's talk about some elements, some like terms and actions and object names and things like that. So when I think about taxonomies and terms and actions, I think of Photoshop because I'm weird like that, I guess. But imagine just like 40 years of just like putting more and more stuff into your menus, right? You have like different distort filters, you have noise and pixelate and render, and within there you have spherize and sphere and ripple and things like that, which are really like clear and automatopoetic, right? Like you kind of know what ripple does, but what about polar coordinates, right? Like designers, you probably know what that does, but it's just like a massive like taxonomy that just kind of got shoved together over time. They just all have to live in that same space in a harmonious way, but you can't change too much of it because all the graphic designers in the world will collectively revolt against you because they're muscle memory. When I worked at Adobe, I knew every time one little thing changed because I heard about it from all my graphic design friends. As opposed to something like this. This is a kind of a small online platform. I sell my zines and some stickers and stuff through here. And one of the things that really strikes me is how simple the taxonomy is. Like all of the kind of like main pieces of their product is just like in a little list down the side, right? You got your products, you got checkout, you got emails and stock and orders and things like that. Obviously, these are much different situations. Like Gumroad's a much simpler platform than like Photoshop is an app. But just, 2 different approaches. And those are all kind of like language-led experiences, right? Like we have to name these things and make sure that they bear some amount of meaning and like fit together in kind of a consistent way. This is from the Adobe Spectrum design system, which I know we have some Spectrum folks in the audience. Woo! I was part of the team that put this in there, and this is all public. This is the in-product word list. So it's a bunch of like kind of managed terms and like language that you might use in there. So for example, like, we're building something new. Do we call it an application? Do we call it an app? Auto, like there's so many auto things in Adobe products. Auto layout is a Figma thing, but not an Adobe product. Use with caution. Like here are some ways that you can use auto, here's some ways that you shouldn't. So humans thought about this and tried to just create a system out of this language. Oh yeah, I apparently put a scroll in here. It's a lot. There's a lot of these words in here. And then finally, let's talk about components. I think that when a lot of people think about like content patterns or microcopy or strings or something, the first thing, at least that I think about, are error messages. So maybe not like, this Susan Care error message specifically, but there's a lot of really weird, bad error messages in the world. And I don't know if any other content designers in this room or designers for that matter, like you work at a company and they're like, hey, Andy, can you just go ahead and like just audit all of our error messages and rewrite them? Just like, oh God, there's so many of them. It's like, I can't do that, but I can give you a formula. I can like work on some standards and try this out. So again, from Spectrum, this was basically in a little guide we had called Writing for Errors. We have, dialog box like, hey, what happened? What's the underlying clause? And if you can, how do you fix it or become unblocked? So we can give this to engineering teams when they're sort of like developing these. We can give these now to LLMs to sort of write. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, like we're thinking sort of about like that systemic approach to it. Has anybody here used the Reddit app on, this is from iOS, but probably elsewhere? Like whenever you're served a post that isn't necessarily from a subreddit that you follow, it probably has this heading on there. So because you visited this community before, because you've shared posts from this community, because you've shown interest in this community, these are all content patterns, right? Like somebody was thinking about the structure of this to make sure it's consistent, to make sure that you can skim it and kind of understand why you're seeing this post, right? So somebody has thought about all this stuff, which is great. So, if words are such an important part of design, why do we think of design in terms of visual tools, right? Like Figma, Sketch, Penpot. I should probably take Adobe XD off this list. Pour a little out. But yeah, we have very like big, complicated tools for this. If you're designing an experience for this, do you need Figma for that? Like I don't think necessarily you do. You can probably make a really slick like prototype, right? That's very audio based and has a lot of good timing and cues. But I have a friend who was prototyping a chatbot at Western Union in a spreadsheet, and you can very much just like, hey, like see the flow and see how it works by like acting it out and just by kind of like reading through this. So something that my co-author Michael Metz likes to say that we made sure just to include in the book is like, don't mistake making a deliverable with making a difference, which I think is important. We have really nice, gorgeous prototypes, but sometimes just a messy, I like to prototype in like Keynote sometimes. So somebody mentioned the PM who's just like, oh, hey, or a customer who's like, we did this in PowerPoint, what do you think? It's just kind of like, oh, and also use bright pink Comic Sans for the language that you're writing if you really want people to know this is like for placement only, right? Like they can't take that seriously. So good pro tip. All right, so there's a few things, moving on to the next thing, that I want to talk about when we write for user experiences, right? There's kind of three big main principles. Your writing should be usable and useful and responsible. And we're going to go through a little bit of what that means here. So what's the difference between usable and useful? I think that they're very similar, but basically usable just means that users can do stuff. You can help your users do stuff. So this was an example from the Adobe Creative Cloud mobile app that my team worked on when I was there. And we basically, at the end of a list of tutorials, there was something that encouraged you to go search for more. So we took it from this string, just not finding what you're looking for, tap on the search icon next to your profile picture, which was very much tell, don't show. And we changed that, harnessing the power of hyperlinks. We actually made it so you can tap search and go to the search function. Reduce that by, wow, almost 2/3. Made it a little bit clearer and use hyperlinks. So thank you, Tim Berners-Lee, for inventing hyperlinks. You're a real one. This is a very unusable pattern. Anybody from the Bay Area, do you recognize this? I mean, really from anywhere, but this is the Clipper card reloading station on the BART. So on our like regional light rail transport. There is, this has changed, by the way, since then, but this is maybe like 8 years ago. And so you can do stuff. You can add $1, you can subtract $1 from your card or from the balance. Sure. You can add 5 cents, subtract 5 cents. I don't know why you would want to do that because you're just going to be pushing that button a lot. But there was this other thing, and it's a little hard to read, but it says, accept ePurse upgrade. And I just remember just like, kind of like with that caviar example, I was like, what the heck is an ePurse upgrade? So one time I just hit that button. All it does is it adds $20 to your card. That's all it does. And so like, why do we have to sort of brand this under this ePurse upgrade? So it was, I just kept imagining like a tourist to San Francisco who just like wants to like get across town and they're about to miss their train. Maybe they don't speak English very well. They see this and they're just like, what? So it just really gets hung up. By the way, at some point there was sort of like this big reimagining of the Clipper card and how it works. And guess who wrote a strongly worded letter to the board about this? That was me. I'm sure it wasn't me who got it changed, but now I think it just says like add $20, so that's good. Yeah. You have to figure out, in order to be usable, you have to figure out if people can use the words you've written, which is like kind of a no-brainer, right? But there's really great resources out there. To do that, you should be using UX research. So if you are lucky enough to work at a company with researchers, work with them, think about the language as well as the like sort of interactive and visual experience. If you're doing it on your own, this is a really great book, Just Enough Research. Anybody here read this? Yeah, my friend Erica wrote it. This is the latest edition after A Book Apart went under. They re-released it. They call it the Shitty Pulp Edition. It looks like an old kind of pulp novel. So they were very smart in that they got me to buy another copy of this book. So I like that one a lot. So you can also, in my book, we talk about strategy and testing. We talk about testing your message. What are some ways that you can test your writing? It's not super dissimilar from like user testing for UX, right? Like you can do user interviews. You can talk to users and listen how they describe their goals and how they accomplish them. It's really good for terms and actions and some of those elemental stuff. There's contextual inquiry, which is interesting. So sort of pay attention to the environment around your users. So at one point, I worked at an autonomous car company, and writing for a car experience is a much different thing than writing for like a pro-level photography app, right? There's usability testing, like put a prototype in front of your users and kind of see how they're figuring out how to use it. That's really useful for identifying language gaps, like people staring at a word. It's like, I don't know what that means, or I don't know how to proceed. And I'm actually really bad at this because I just want to really be helpful. And so I'm just like, no, you got to do this. But the whole point is to see how they do it on their own. And then my personal favorite, card sorting. This is really fun and tactile. You get a bunch of Post-it notes or index cards, and you can really see kind of a user's mental model of what sort of the IA should be or kind of what the taxonomy is. I did this a few times in the past to kind of see how to organize some menus. It's great. So much fun. All right, let's talk about the next thing, useful. What's the difference between useful and usable? So, well, usable writing is like, making it so users can do stuff with your thing. Useful is doing what users want. So this is something, apologies if anybody here works at the Grand Melia Hotels and Resorts. Anybody? Oh, good. I have a story about something like that here in a second. But this is something that my co-author experienced when he was trying to book a vacation. He got this confirmation modal. And by the way, if you create an account, unless you checkmark both of those boxes, you can't activate your account. So let's see what you're agreeing to. So yes, I want to register for the loyalty program. Yes, I have read their terms of service. Yes, I want to receive information about special offers and promotions and accept the conditions. But also, if you don't want to receive commercial information, click here. But also to perceive, you have to say, I do not wish to receive advertisements. So we're thinking that maybe somebody was just like, slap some GDPR on this and call it a day. We weren't really thinking about this kind of holistically. It's not super useful. Is this something that is really useful? Is anybody here a nerd and read the Pinterest terms of service ever? No, just me. Something that they have on that website, which is really great, is under each kind of like main section, they have this thing that says more simply put, where it's just like super plain language and it's something people can actually understand. It's really useful. How could you make this better is to make the whole terms of service in that language, but I've worked with legal enough to know that that's really not realistic. So I think that this is kind of a good compromise there. Finally, responsible. So this is important to talk about. So as writers, we're constantly seeing the bigger picture of things, right? I had a boss formerly who said that content design was kind of the connective tissue that ran throughout our products. So we see it all, and we can really see where stress cases are happening. And often we're among the first to sort of identify those stress cases. Because writing is like pure information, right? Like we take concepts and we articulate them, and you can really see when these kind of like conceptual gaps are. So in order to be useful and usable, we always have to be user-centric. So how do we do that? How are we responsible in that? There's a really great book, maybe some of you have read it, by Kat Holmes. It's called Mismatch. Kat is I think she's now the head of UX. It's like Salesforce or something. But she wrote a really great book about inclusive design. And she says one of the greatest shortcomings of human-centered design is its lack of guidance on how to include diversity as part of the design process. So which human exactly belongs in the center? Most designers then end up using their own abilities and experience as a baseline for their designs. I know that I do. I project my own sort of expectations onto the things that I write. I think that like users are very resilient, and if something is not really designed with them in mind, they often find ways to use it. So going back to Lyft, this was an example of a push notification I got probably like 8 years ago, where I hailed a ride and it said this: your Lyft driver is deaf or hard of hearing. Please text instead of calling. Tap this notification to learn hello or thank you in sign language. It's like, that's great. That's really cool that they're kind of going the extra mile for this. So I started getting this notification a lot, like maybe once every 3 or 4 rides over the course of a couple years, and I was trying to figure out why. I was like, we can't have that many deaf or hard of hearing drivers, right? Well, it turns out, found out later, that a lot of drivers who don't speak English very confidently would use this feature in order to sort of signal to writers that they, can't like participate in just like conversation, right? They found a really good way to use something that wasn't designed for them to help them, to kind of design in their favor. So it's since gone away. I'm assuming that they have a kind of better way to signal that now. Or maybe Lyft is just like, nope, this isn't how you use it. We're going to take it away. But in any case, it was just a very interesting, resilient way that people who were not centered in the design process still made use of this. So that's just a really kind of fun example. So while you're writing and while you're designing can be more useful and help things, you can also actively harm people and deceive people. And that's really scary and hard. That's kind of where I was at in January of this year, if anybody in the US remembers this. So get on my soapbox real quick. I think probably everybody here agrees. DEI, not a bad word. It's something that's really important for design. It's important to hire diverse teams. It's important to have diverse users and to make sure you're designing for diverse users with diverse teams. I think that's really important. It's something we should all be talking about. So speaking of acronyms, speaking of big things, let's talk about the large language elephant in the room, AI. We've had some good talk about AI. Look, I'm a daily active user of AI products, right? I work at a company that makes AI productivity tools. So I've experienced firsthand how it can help scale my work. I'm a team of one among a team of really incredible, talented designers. But also, as it helps me scale my work, it also hallucinates, lies. Sometimes it's really, really wrong. One rule that I have for myself is that I'm using, say, ChatGPT or something to generate microcopy permutations, which we'll talk about in a little bit, or to generate names or explore terms or something like that. I really need to make sure that everything that the AI outputs is something that is read by me, or a human, at least. If it's something where it's sort of dynamically generating it as it goes, I just do extensive testing with an engineer to make sure that, like, kind of edge cases and stress cases are covered, and our prompt is like the right amount of deterministic or whatever in order to like get predictable results here. This is an example from the weather app my friend Shannon gave to me. Avoid this subject event as per instruction. So when I gave this example at Config in San Francisco earlier this year, and maybe like literally the one person on earth who knows about this was there, and she came up to me afterwards and she was like, "Hey Andy, I work for the weather app." I was like, "Oh shit, sorry." I've called out companies before, but never actually like had somebody come back to me on that. So this data was passed to them through the National Weather Service. So it was, I always want to say that now, this was a National Weather Service thing, not the weather app, just so you all know. Yeah, so it kind of spit out something that was way out of left field from what like a user might be expecting, right? So given kind of like the skepticism and this negativity toward generative AI, I just want to say I'm not an AI detractor, right? I'm also not an AI booster. I really want to be pragmatic about it. And I really want to acknowledge that a lot of your bosses, as with my boss, are expecting us to incorporate AI into our work a lot more. So I think that's happening. And like, we can find ways to do this for UX writing and without, just making slop and feeling your brain turn to mush, which sometimes I felt like. So even at my company, like an AI company, our engineers struggle to figure out how to best integrate Cursor and Claude Code with their work sometimes. Designers are more and more using like Replit or V0 or Figma Make now, which are really cool tools. And there are always ways that if it helps, and there are ways that it hinders your work. So before we wrap up, I want to give you just some short pragmatic walkthroughs of the main ways I use AI in my writing. So our design team at Glean has a team account with Claude. but this also applies to ChatGPT and I think Gemini as well. But something that I use a lot is the projects. So does anybody here use a LM projects feature? It's really good if you're like writing a book or something like that. It's basically, if you haven't used it, it's like a little extra space to upload extra instructions or like training materials or something that only sort of affects the stuff that happens in that project. So I have some custom instructions. So basically telling Claude, hey, you're a UX writing coworker of mine. So these are our users. This is your role. This is some things that you should be thinking about. So we also have, and this is maybe the most important, is we have files. We have training materials. So I uploaded our error message guidelines, naming how we name things, voice and tone principles and profiles, just because it is it is mine. I was like, I'm just going to put my book in there so I can read that too, get some extra context, and then also terms and term lists that we do. And it's actually pretty useful. I re-upload and like just updated materials every couple months. It really helps for consistency. So as let's say I'm working on an option for our agent builder tool that uses internal company data for search. And this is perhaps what a designer I work with wrote, just to be replaced, right? Company search, little eye emojis. Use AI to deterministically generate results based off of your great query. Just like, okay, that could use some work. So you pop it in there, I Command-Shift-C that from Figma, put that into Claude, write a little thing like, hey, I'm trying to write an option for like an agent action, just give it some context. Has this headline and body description, but it doesn't feel quite right. Can you help me write more clearly and in our voice? So this is the typical output that it gives me. Before it gives me the suggested copy, it flags some issues that it sees with the existing string, right? Like, oh, hey, like this is deterministically is kind of a jargony word for most users. Your great query feels too casual, maybe slightly condescending. It's like, oh, that's true. The value prop isn't clear. What does generate results based off your query actually mean for the user's workflow? And it didn't say a thing about the emoji, but it's not super great. Then it moves on to the suggested rewrite. There it goes, plus an alternate. And it references what part of our voice and tone strategy it's referencing. So it's not bad. It's like maybe 60 or 70% of the time it kind of does what I want for simple strings, and I move on. Actually, something I'm going to try to like get it to do a little bit better is to put the suggested writing on top. Yeah, so that's a little bit more useful, a little bit more skimmable. But wait, I realize in my meetings with the product marketing team that when we often want to describe something as deterministic, the language that we use is predictable, like in marketing materials, right? And we want to be consistent. We want to make sure our message kind of carries through. So here's a revised message, and let's call it done, right? Like went through a couple rounds. Occasionally the LLM just doesn't want to give me what I want, but it does give me a good direction to start off in, right? Like it helps me just like find a general direction to improve. So lots of good tools out there to do this. I imagine we're going to see more of them hit the market in the next few years. We all know these, right? Like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, but there's some really good enterprise tools too. Anybody here ever use Writer? Yeah, Writer's a great. When I worked at Microsoft, we were just starting to incorporate it into the company. It kind of like, that's a special purpose like writing AI bot. Cursor actually has a surprisingly good like UX writing helper assistant. It's just because it pipes in a larger LLM. I've used that a couple times when I've been like in code trying to like be like, oh god, I need to change this. What should it be? And then also shameless plug, Glean is getting better as a writing assistant. Does anybody here work at a company that uses Glean? Okay, nice. Okay, it's not great at writing, but it's getting better. That's a big use case we've been working on. So there are some things I think LLMs are good at, and some things I think it's not good at, especially for writing. And I think it's a really interesting trend. So some things that it's good at lengthening and shortening strings. I use this all the time. It's like, hey, I wrote this thing. I don't know how to make this shorter, but it has to fit into this space. If you give it a character count, it does a really good job of staying within that. It's really good at following well-defined grammar and terminology rules. It's really good at iterating and enumerating on multiples of something in bulk, but also not too many multiples. I have kind of maxed out the context window with too big of a spreadsheet before. That was not fun. Some things that LLMs are not good at, writing from scratch with no context, like goes in all sorts of directions with that, even when you sort of like train it and tell it kind of what you think is good. It's not great at capturing nuanced voice and tone, like if you have a very specific like purpose that you want to follow and very clear like tone principles about what tone you should be taking for those contexts is good, but like it's really bad at capturing kind of that editorial nuance. And then also picking the right thing to put in the messaging. I always come to it basically saying like, oh, hey, this is what it should say, this is what it should do. So do you notice anything kind of about these trends? So it's a good writer. It's pretty good at writing. But it doesn't have the strategy that you have. It doesn't have the context that you have. It doesn't have your taste. Earlier, Calvin mentioned soft skills, and he stole my line because I was basically like, soft skills. It turns out they're the hardest skills of all. But it's true. It can't align stakeholders, right? Like it can't convince people that like, hey, this is the direction we need to go. So it's going to be a lot harder to replace these skills with AI. Like maybe someday we can, but we're definitely not there. But the trouble is these are always the skills that we've downplayed. These are the skills that we've kind of like pushed under the rug in favor of craft, which again, craft, very important, but there comes a point at which you need to, maybe you're becoming a manager, you put those tools away, right? Like he was saying. But so maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit time that we own those tools a little bit more. So maybe this is a future talk, but I believe strongly that AI is a tool and not a coworker. If anybody here, I don't know, did this campaign show up in New York? Yeah, all over the place in San Francisco. The bus stop right by my house had that, and I just wanted to like graffiti it or something. It is offensive, and I think that they're being extra provocative. They don't super care if they're being offensive. I mean, they stole Allison Williams' face to put on this billboard. But I've seen so many bad takes on this. So if you're a writer or a designer and AI can just kind of wholesale replace you, then you're probably a word jockey or a Figma monkey or something like that. So yes, you should use AI tools in your writing, or at least try them, especially if your leadership is kind of judging your performance based on that. It helps speed up your process, but don't outsource your thinking, your taste, your decision making. So real quick to recap what we talked about, writing is important at every step of the design process. We should be thinking about language and systems in order to scale our work. Your writing should be useful, usable, and responsible. AI is a tool, not a coworker. Use accordingly. I'm online. You can find all those things that Vitaly told me about where to find me on there. Or find me in person. I have stickers. So happy to hand some of those out. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. These are so cute.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so we have so many questions coming in here as well. I think one interesting point that I wanted to bring up right away is like, it's interesting for me, like for us coming from Europe, to see the huge hype around AI in the US.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it as a, oh wow, what the hell are you doing or anything of that kind. It's just really such a contrast.
Yeah.
Extremely stark contrast. So if you go, let's say, in Germany, go to Berlin, and you have a conversation about AI, they would say, you'll probably hear something like, this is AI generated, that's horrible.
Yeah.
This is sort of the attitude towards AI, not in terms of like, oh, we shouldn't be using it, it's horrible and all, but very often it has this really negative connotation.
Yeah.
AI is not great. That's sort of the state of things.
Yeah.
And of course, people do use, and they use ChatGPT and Claude and so on and so forth. But you would also see a lot of people using it for private stuff, like give me 5 movies to watch tonight.
Yeah.
But they would be very reluctant to use it for presentations or for reports or anything like that, to the point that they would actually really actively ignore, or at least not tell publicly, to their manager, to the boss that they used AI, right, for that. And I'm wondering, especially when it comes to writing, do you think that it will change? I mean, this is also some of the questions that came in here, that we will be just writing with AI as our co-partner, co-writing assistant or something, and so we're just going to write faster? Or do you think that we're going to write slower because we now have to think about us and the humans in the equation and the voice and tone that we are applying rather than just relying on something generic like AI?
Yeah, that's a hard question. There's what I think and what I hope, and unfortunately those are kind of different things, right? Like I can see AI being very useful in like editing my writing, right? Like hey, maybe developmentally these ideas aren't super clear, and there's a typo over here. That could be really useful. I can also see like I'm trying to get some idea out, but I can't really do it in a clean way. Maybe AI can write this, and I can edit. So I think the best results will be something that's like a collaboration, excuse me, or a tool. But I think there's a lot of people, especially right now, who are using it to. Have you ever seen that? Like, there's a comic that's kind of like a little web comic that's. It's like I'm too busy. I'm going to write like this report in 5 bullet points and have AI turn it into a paper, and then they give it to their boss, and their boss is like, I'm too busy to read this all. I'm going to turn this into 5 bullet points using AI. Like that feels like where we're at right now. I don't know how many like really verbose things on Slack or something that I've seen at work. I think it makes it very easy to turn your brain off to some of that critical thinking, or just like the writing muscle to do this. But at the same time, I think that like people are becoming more attuned to it, right? Like I don't know how accurate I am, but sometimes I really feel like I can tell when something's written by AI. Like LinkedIn influencers.
Smell, I think.
Yeah. It's not about
feel
this.
Like it?
It's about this.
Yes. Does anybody can almost like smell when this seems like it's AI generated?
Smells like an LLM.
Yes. Like especially, but then the thing is it's also kind of connected to that.
Yeah.
I mean, do you believe in M-dashes?
I am a big M-dash fan.
Okay.
And
how are we going to save them?
I just tell people, so in the US, in like the 80s or 90s, there was this public service commercial of this kid who was like caught smoking marijuana by his father. And his father's like, what are you doing? And the kid's like, I learned it from you. Does anybody remember that? I feel like AI is the same way, right? Like the reason that ChatGPT uses so many M-dashes is because it learned it from me, right? So I don't feel like I have to like reclaim it. It's always been mine.
Okay.
So a friend of mine described it as the emotional support M-dash. That's how I feel about it. I also learned
emotional.
Yes. I also learned recently that in Unicode there is a triple M-dash that you can use that just makes a big like that. So go look for it. It's fun.
Okay, well, this is inspirational. Question from James.
Yes.
Do you have suggestions on how to improve writing abilities for someone who took only the one required English course in college? If I needed to write short paragraphs to use on a website, would you trust AI tools to do that for me?
That's a good question. I typically like, especially people who don't feel confident in their writing, I think especially like with UX writing specifically, if you just use your voice, like start sounding things out and say things, like how would you naturally describe what's happening here? And I think you can get most of the way there just doing that, right? Like probably you're, like especially if you're a designer or like work at a company, like you've presented a little bit, you have conversations that get pretty hard and nuanced. And if you can just kind of like speak it out, I think that you can write it a little bit better. You can at least see where to start, right? And I don't know, if you can get like that 60% of the way there with just like doing that, I think that you can probably use something like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever to just like get a little bit further, right? Especially if you have like training materials like voice and tone and some examples and a style guide, like that can kind of like help you make it look a little bit more consistent. Again, would not recommend just like starting off from scratch that way, but by having something that you can give to it to try it. So,
okay, makes sense. Well, more questions, so I'm just going to go through them.
Yeah.
2 questions that actually are similar, so I'm going to bring them together. Ariel is wondering, how do you see the role of UX writers evolving as AI is leveraged more and more in UX writing? And another question that just came in, do you think content designers and UX designers will eventually morph into one role?
Ooh, that's juicy. I don't know. I think that, I'll take that second question first. I think that a lot of companies are already the same, right? Like a lot of times, maybe it's a small team, they don't have like dedicated UX writers.
So they have just one designer.
Yeah, and they're thinking really hard and carefully about the language. And I do think that because of AI, I think that we're going to be seeing like smaller teams, right? Like Facebook or Meta used to have like 600 content designers. It was huge.
600?
600 before kind of the AI stuff and layoffs happened. And I think they're back down to like a couple hundred, maybe 300. But I don't think we're going to see like giant teams like that anymore. Which to me, to answer that first question, speaks more toward, you worked in web UX long enough to know before there were content designers, we were all just content strategists. And not just, we were content strategists, right?
Yeah, sure.
I feel like we're going to be seeing more of that again. Maybe we're not called that, but like people who are thinking about systems and we're thinking about sort of like the business and user use case of content and making it more discoverable. Like, hey, if you're thinking about like metadata and like things like that, you're probably also thinking about how it's going to be ingested by LLMs as well as search engines, right? So I feel like that kind of like basis of content strategy is going to become more and more important because, you know, that's the stuff that, at least right now, I don't think that AI does very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, this is an interesting one. In my company, teams still design with lorem ipsum.
Yep.
And treat writing as a final step later. What's the most effective way? Anybody feels like this?
This happens in my company all the time. Yeah.
Okay. What's the most effective way to integrate a content designer or more attention to content into the workflow from the beginning?
Yeah. We have a little bit in our book about this. I think that the better you are at sort of being shameless and inviting yourself to meetings is really useful. When I worked at Adobe, I would sometimes just be like, hey, that looks relevant. I'm going to invite myself to that meeting. I think also just like being a useful member of your team is really useful. And by that, I mean like not just being like, oh, hey, I only touch, you know, interface words. Like I'm not going to do this other stuff. When sometimes maybe like your PM is writing a PRD and they're really struggling to articulate something, or there's like a slide deck that's coming and they just really need to be like thinking about the language. Like I have found a lot of ability to influence people and build relationships by doing other kind of writing things. I used to help like some of my designers. At that point, my company was really into like writing like tutorials and case studies on Medium, and I would help like some of our designers write them, and just really show like, hey, I'm thinking about this in the same way that you are as a designer, but I also have this particular, a particular set of skills, right? Like I'm thinking about this from a certain angle. So
Sure.
I think that's a good way to sort of like get people thinking about it, because it's going to happen. Like sometimes you're going to get brought in last minute, or somebody didn't think to invite you, or this happened before you came, or you were on vacation because there's only one of you. So when that happens, there's nothing, right? Like sometimes that happens, and you can't always be in the room. So just finding ways to get in there, I think, is useful.
I think also like what you mentioned about voice design.
Yeah.
I think that is often so underrated because, of course, in the end, it's not just the words, right? It's like you have limits in terms of how long the conversation can go. Like people don't remember because they cannot really navigate between that response that they're getting from whatever audio output is and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you actually have, let's say, a project where you have to design for a voice assistant or something that supports voice. Like it could be even an AI feature integrated in your product or something like that.
Yeah.
How would you actually even write for it? I mean, actually the process. Do you need to then, for different types of tasks or different personas, define different ways of speaking? For example, if somebody is asking something about a critical error that they have, it's a one thing, but if it's, let's say, onboarding, then you can be a bit more charming and inviting, right?
Yeah.
And how would that work all together? Like, what would be the workflow for that?
That's a good question. I would call that like tone, right? Like tone profiles. So you want to be very motivational when you do onboarding, or very supportive or reassuring when you're doing like privacy or security issues. And I think that the important part of that is to take like it's not just sort of conceptual, right? Like let's have some good like practical tips for this. And if you can develop that. So for example, if you're writing in a very motivational way, maybe you want to like lead with the value, right? Like this is why you should be doing this. And maybe it's a little bit more like upbeat, and maybe it's very expressive as a brand, right? Like you have great graphics around there too. So I think the more of like those practical tips you can share, the better it is to scale that into a system, rather than just like, hey, I like doing some creative writing. Like let's think of a character that we can inhabit when you get in there. Like that's fun and cool, but a lot of people just don't resonate with that. So I think, like that's part of that whole systemic language thing, right? Is thinking about like really solid use cases and key parts of the user journey where users might be getting caught up or need a little extra boost to get them there. Like defining that kind of stuff is really important, and I think that helps you write for that.
And given just how optimistic you are in general, does the future look bright, Andy? It might be a leading question.
I've been thinking hard about just going to go work at a bookstore. That's what I would. I'm sure everybody here has a like, what are you going to do after tech story, right? Bookstore.
Okay, sounds good to me.
I don't know. I think we're at a particularly bad spot. I think it's going to change. I think there's not going to be as many kind of like easy opportunities. Like it used to be, if you put the word content designer, UX writing in your LinkedIn profile, like some recruiter from Meta will reach out to you. And I don't quite think that's the case anymore. It's going to be a little bit harder. But I also think like given, I mean, prompt engineers is kind of a new thing, right? Like people who are working on.
Oh, I can go on forever.
Oh God.
I mean, like, do we really expect every single person on the planet to understand how to talk to AI? Shouldn't AI understand how we talk? I think.
Yep.
I mean, I just really get confused.
I love when I get just like some slop out of like Glean. Everybody's like, "Well, you didn't structure your query right." I was like, "I shouldn't have to."
Yeah, you shouldn't have to. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, we can go on forever. But if you have any questions, Wendy, you can also find any in outside. Well, after the next session, where I think we'll be happy to answer any questions that.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here, Andy.
Yeah.
Thank you.